When two cops think they've got the upper hand and lie in court, they have no idea that their victim is hiding a CIA clearance. What unfolds next completely upends their world. The city of Atlanta was its usual hustle and bustle on a Monday morning. Fast-moving but somehow still stuck in its rhythm. The streets played like a symphony of honking horns, murmured conversations, and the occasional frustrated sigh from a commuter who hadn't had enough caffeine. The air was a mix of fresh coffee and exhaust fumes, a perfect snapshot of routine chaos. Jasmine Carter, however, wasn't fazed by the symphony around her. She stepped out of her sleek black sedan, heels clicking firmly against the pavement, walking with an air of absolute certainty. She didn't hesitate or doubt for a second. This was her world, and she belonged exactly where she was, a woman on a mission. The Thompson Federal Courthouse stood before her, tall and gray. Its imposing structure meant to represent justice. But Jasmine knew better. Justice didn't live here. It only stopped by occasionally, and usually in the form of handcuffs. She adjusted the strap of her leather briefcase, familiar weight in her hand, where documents lay that could completely tilt the balance of a federal case. Information that those in expensive suits would kill to keep buried. In her other hand, just a simple folder. But the papers inside were worth more than the lives of the men who were about to put her patience to the test. She was only 5 steps away from the courthouse entrance when it happened. "Hey, hands up!" Jasmine froze. The voice was sharp, loud, and carried that unmistakable authority that came with a badge, and the assumption that it never needed to explain itself. She turned slowly, her pulse steady, her expression unreadable. 2 white officers stood behind her, their hands hovering over their holsters, Sergeant Rick Daly and Officer Connor Brooks. No need for a name tag. She could tell what they were. She'd met their type before, same playbook, different faces. Daly stepped forward, his jaw tight. Chest puffed out just enough to make sure she saw the badge pinned to his uniform, as if it meant something. "Ma'am, put the bag down and step back." His words were calm, but his stance said otherwise. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, a faint trace of amusement dancing in her dark eyes. Oh, this was going to be fun. "Excuse me, what's the issue?" Brooks was already scanning her up and down, eyes darting to her briefcase as though it might explode. Apparently, a black woman in a suit carrying a folder was now a national security threat. You match the description of a suspect involved in fraudulent government activity. Jasmine let the words hang for a beat. Too ridiculous to acknowledge at first. Then she let out a slow, humorless laugh. "Let me guess, black woman, nice suit, carrying important-looking papers?" "Yeah, I hear that's a real danger these days." Daly's jaw twitched. "Just cooperate, ma'am." There was the tone of a demand, not a request. Jasmine's eyes flickered to the courthouse doors. She was minutes away from leading a hearing. Yet here she was, treated like a criminal for existing in the wrong skin. "I don't have time for this," she said, her voice even. "I work here." Daly didn't blink, didn't ask a single follow-up question, didn't care, because black people explaining themselves to cops never mattered in their eyes. He reached for his cuffs. "You resist, it's obstruction," Brooks added. "Obstruction?" Jasmine almost smiled. "That's cute. Obstruction? What exactly am I obstructing?" "The fresh air." DA's patience snapped and the cuffs came out. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't fight. She just lifted her hands and let them happen. Because she wasn't just playing their game. She was about to flip the whole damn board. Jasmine Carter had seen bad cops before. She had witnessed them lie, manipulate, and abuse their power like it was their birthright. She'd studied them, exposed them, and dismantled them piece by piece, brick by brick. But this time was different. She sat inside a cold, dimly lit holding cell, her back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap like she was in a boardroom, not behind bars. The walls smelled of sweat, cheap bleach, and injustice, a familiar scent in precincts like these. But Jasmine wasn't waiting. She was listening. Right outside the cell, Sergeant Daly and Officer Brooks were having a conversation, They thought she couldn't hear. "We have the documents on her," Brooks muttered. His voice was low, but not low enough. "Amateurs," Daly exhaled sharply. "Let's just say she tried to pass them off as real clearance files." Jasmine's fingers tightened around her knee. Oh, so this wasn't just about arresting her. They were framing her. Forgery and impersonating a federal officer. The irony was almost laughable. Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of the moment settle in. Not because she was scared or angry, but because she was tired. Tired of the same old script. Tired of the same recycled lies. Mostly, tired of men like Daly thinking they could get away with it. She's a nobody. The judge will believe us. They always do. A nobody? Jasmine took a slow breath. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She let them talk. Let them dig themselves deeper with every word, every smug assumption. It was all evidence. Then the door to the holding area slammed open, like thunder rolling in before a storm. Enter Marcus Bell, tall, broad-shouldered, with a suit so sharp it could cut glass. A black defense attorney with a reputation that had sent more than a few prosecutors into early retirement. He didn't walk into rooms. He took ownership of them. And right now, this precinct belonged to him. He didn't spare DA or Brooks a glance. He strode straight to Jasmine's cell. "She's coming with me." Daly tensed. "She's facing serious charges." Marcus barely blinked. He pulled a thick file from his briefcase and slid it across the desk with the kind of confidence that said he already knew he had won. Daly frowned and picked it up. "What's this?" Marcus leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel dangerous. "Oh, just a little something from the Department of Justice." Daly's jaw tightened. "Turns out Miss Carter isn't just some civilian. She's a consultant on federal security clearance cases." The room went still. Brooks shifted uncomfortably. "That doesn't mean she didn't." Marcus raised a finger, one simple gesture that made Brooks shut up. Marcus let the silence stretch before speaking again, slow and deliberate. "And that fraudulent document you claim she had." He let the question hang in the air, like a hunter giving its prey one last second to realize it had been caught. "It was meant for today's federal court hearing." Daly's face drained of color. Brooks swallowed hard. "She didn't tell us." Jasmine spoke for the first time, calm, controlled, and deadly. "Oh, I didn't? Must have slipped my mind, since I was thrown in cuffs before I could even open my mouth." Brooks wouldn't meet her eyes. Daly clenched his jaw, doubling down on the only thing left he had, his pride. "We were just doing our job." Jasmine tilted her head, studying him like a scientist examining a lab rat. "Oh, you think this is over?" DA and Brooks exchanged nervous glances. For the first time since they slapped cuffs on her, they felt it. The creeping, suffocating realization that they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. The morning air outside the Thompson Federal Courthouse was thick with tension. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing, microphones poised. Inside, the air buzzed with the kind of anticipation that only comes before a public execution. But today, the executioners weren't the ones in uniform. DA and Brooks sat rigid in the defendant's seats, their backs straight, their faces frozen in practiced neutrality. But anyone watching closely, anyone paying attention, could see the panic creeping in. Brooks kept shifting in his seat, his hands twitching against his lap. Daly's jaw was so tight it looked like his teeth might snap in half. They had spent their entire careers walking into courtrooms as accusers, never as the accused. But today, they weren't the ones holding the power. Then the door swung open and the shift in the room was instant. People turned. Whispers began. Even Judge Harris looked up. Jasmine Carter walked in. No cuffs. No panic. No fear. Her stride was measured. Her expression cool and calculated. The kind of calm that wasn't forced but earned. She didn't rush. She didn't have to. The room adjusted to her. Daly swallowed hard. Brooks's grip tightened on the table. They had never seen her like this before, Free, unapologetic, unchained. She walked down the aisle past the rows of spectators, her heels tapping the marble floor in a deliberate rhythm, like a drumbeat leading to their downfall. And the best part, they knew it. She reached the witness stand, settled into her seat without hesitation, adjusted her blazer, crossed her legs, and looked straight ahead. Judge Harris, a seasoned woman with sharp eyes that had seen every trick in the book, leaned forward slightly. Miss Carter, I understand you have something to present before the court. Jasmine nodded, exhaling slowly. The room held its breath. DA and Brooks stiffened. Then, with the calm precision of someone who knew exactly how this was going to play out, she reached into her blazer pocket. Brooks flinched. Daly gritted his teeth. In one swift motion, Jasmine pulled out her CIA clearance badge. The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, a slow-building wave of realization that crashed down all at once. Daly's face went white. Brooks looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from under him. The DA scrambled, flipping through files, trying to find something, anything, to salvage this wreckage. And Jasmine? She just smiled. Not big, not dramatic, just enough to say, "You played the wrong game with the wrong woman." Her voice was calm, even cutting. "Your Honor, these men knowingly detained me under false charges, obstructed a federal investigation, and fabricated evidence against me." She let it settle. Then she leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto the DA's. "But here's the best part. I was already investigating them." Silence. Then chaos. The DA fumbled, trying to regain control. Judge Harris slammed her gavel. Spectators whispered. Attorneys muttered. But DA and Brooks? They sat frozen, like men who just realized they had been dead from the moment they put those cuffs on her. Their careers shattered. Their power gone. Their future? Not so bright. Jasmine stood, adjusting her blazer, gathering her things like she had just wrapped up a casual meeting. For her, this was a revenge. This was justice. She turned without a word and walked toward the exit. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. She never ever did.